here is Governor Desantis of Florida pointing out that the Biden regime has inserted itself at the top of the monoclonal antibody distribution chain with bad results, unsurprisingly.
With the monoclonals, that is absolutely leading to people dying, because we saw when we put in our sites this summer in Florida to deal with the Delta wave, we kept tens of thousands of people out of the hospital. We saved thousands of lives by providing that treatment. So that should have been replicated in all these other states. But instead, what Biden and his cronies have done, they've seized control of all the monoclonal antibodies. So yes, when we were in the pinch, I bought some myself. None of the governors now are able to do that because the feds have seized control. So we're in a situation where we've now asked for 40,000 more every week because I have people that I could help, and they are holding on to it, and they're not distributing it.
Clay, the only possible explanation for this is the federal government's gross incompetence. It's either that or they're trying to punish states or something, but I think it has to be incompetence. How could they not have known?
Well, this is wild to think about, Buck, because when we didn't have ventilators ready immediately in March of 2020, how many times did you see media members questioning, incredibly detailed, Donald Trump? Are there going to be enough ventilators? Can you guarantee that every single person in the United States who's going to need ventilators is going to be able to get one? Remember how much Andrew Cuomo griped all of the lack of supplies? And then what did Trump do? We brought in basically World War II era laws to allow all of these big factories to be flipped so they could produce ventilators. And what did we end up with, as Trump predicted we likely would? Millions of ventilators that effectively were not needed because the ventilation strategy, by and large, actually was shown to be mostly not helpful. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the usage of ventilators, if you went on a ventilator, you were basically done, and they found out that that wasn't the best possible treatment.
An absolute, my understanding from doctors, if any doctor out there listening has an update for this or correction, by all means, because we actually want to always get it right. We're not sitting here as Fauci's PR team one way or the other. We actually just want to get it right. But as an absolute last resort, ventilators should be used. They found that different forms of giving people oxygen and even using steroidal inhalers and there are other things. So, yeah, of course, you mentioned the Defense Production Act, the usage of that Trump brought to bear. But, Clay, your essential political point here is everything going wrong with COVID was Donald Trump's fault, according to the media. And where's that with Biden now?
And it was unpredictable. Is the second part of this. The idea that we would need all of these supplies because a once every 100 years pandemic had suddenly arisen was not very predictable in January necessarily of 2020, that in March of 2020 we were going to need all these things. Buck, it was eminently predictable. If you looked at what was going on when Joe Biden took office in January, that we might need, just to toss it out there. Now, I think this testing idea is wildly overvalued in general, because if you don't feel well, stay home. As I have said for years, I've had the flu before. I've never tested positive for the flu. I've just stayed home until I felt better. That's how we treated almost every illness, unless you were so ill that you needed to go to the hospital. You don't need to get tested to confirm that you had a case for the flu. I think that's mostly true for a large number of people out there with its COVID, whether it's a flu, whether it's whatever it is. If you have a fever and you don't feel well, stay home. I mean, that's a general proposition. But, Buck, the idea that we might need tests, or that we might need more of these monoclonal antibodies, that we might need supportive drugs that were something other than the, quote, vaccine, was not some crazy idea. It should have been and was eminently predictable for reasonably intelligent people.
I would also wonder, and I could put this out there, and we should ask Senator Rand Paul maybe in the third hour of this, who, again, is an MD, because this is always a thing. You're not allowed to have any opinions on policy that the libs don't like unless you're a medical doctor. And then if you are a medical doctor, even a very esteemed one who, I don't know, was involved in the initial research for mRNA vaccines, They deplatform you and shut you down and say, see, all the doctors agree. Shut up, you doctor over here. You don't count, right?
Which, by the way, doctors tell us all the time, Buck. People say, well, why do so few doctors speak out? They're terrified.
Well, of course.
If they have a non-consensus opinion, they're going to get deplatformed, shut down. They're going to have consequences in their work.